Good morning, students. Today I am going to start with the topological worms. Okay, from the chapter virus, worms, and malware, which belongs to the module 4. So, the topological worms can be represented as a graph with the nodes representing the vulnerable machines. Okay, so only the name with the topological worms since it is represented as a graph. So, if A and B are the machines which wants to communicate with each other, okay, so if A knows or stores the address of the B and is capable of directly infecting the B, okay, there will be an edge, okay, between A and B. Okay, so A can send the malicious payload to the machine B. Okay, so here each of the machine is represented as a node. Okay, so again the topological worms have the focused targets. Their intermediate targets are their neighbors, who in turn spread the infection to their neighbors and so on. Okay, so initially as a machine A, I will identify overall the neighbors to me. Okay, so then from that neighbors I will try to fetch some data. If it is not available with the neighbors, then what my neighbors will do, they will send that particular request to the data to their neighbors. Okay, and they will get the data, and from them again it will be reply back to me like that. Okay, so here the rate of spreading is faster than the internet scanning worms. Using the topological worms, the rate of spreading is fast. Now we are going to discuss two types of the topological worms, that is email worms and peer-to-peer worms. Okay, so email worms, already we know the few concept, okay, right, how the um, virus can spread, okay, as we are discussing with the worm characteristics, okay, how it will try to identify the target. So email is one of the uh, entity through which it can spread the virus. So now email worms propagates through the infected email. The victim receives the email that comes from the trusted or the familiar source. So victims sees an innocent text file attached to the email. Okay, so but in reality, the for example the file name, okay, named such as loveletter.txt.vbs. Okay, this file, okay, contains the Visual Basic script. Since it is saved with the extension VBS, okay, it contains the Visual Basic script. So if click is performed on this particular file, okay, which is embedded with VB script, okay, it will be executed, sending a copy of itself to every person in the victim's contact list. Okay, that is how it will get spread. So many email worms exploit the fact that documents created by certain word processor will embed the software macros in them. Okay, so through the macros also it will get spread. That is, when the macros is executed, the document is opened and it will get spread. For example, we have Melissa, which was a macro worm, or we can also call it as macrovirus, that propagated by sending copies of itself to the first 50 persons in the victim's address book. And one more famous email worms is SoBig, which was let loose in 2003. It is spreaded by communicating the malicious email or copying itself to an open network share. That is how it will get spread. Okay, and also there are various versions of the SoBig. Among that, one version could update itself by downloading the code from certain websites. That is, the URL of these websites were contained in a file that itself was downloadable from geocities.com. Okay, where it allows the user to host their own free web pages, besides providing the tools in support of building dynamic web pages. Okay, so now once the malicious code is received or installed a keystroke logger and store the password from its victims. That is how the attacker, okay, will come to know about the victim's passwords. Okay, this is about some few points on email worms. That is how the worms will get spreaded with the email worms logic. Peer to next we have P2 peer worms, that is P2P worms. That is P2P network is massively distributed system of computers where each peer or node plays the role of both the client and the server. A node can be client also, server also. Okay, here again each of the machine are represented as the node. Okay, and especially each of the nodes will share the files which can be with respect to songs, images, videos, etc. So all these the files, okay, will be maintained at each of the peer in a shared folder. Okay, shared folder containing of the files which you want, which that particular peer wants to send to another peer. Okay, so again here user is not going to download the files from the central server, but from their peers which is located across the globe, he will do the access. So there are immensely again popular as evident by the fact that a very large portion of the internet traffic is comprised of peer-to-peer packets. So if you want to understand how the peer-to-peer worms spread, we have to understand how a peer-to-peer network operates. Okay, so most of the peer-to-peer network uses the overlay network, which is a logical network of the peers. So two peers are said to be the neighbors at any given point of the time if there is an active TCP connection between them. Okay, so and the characteristic of the peer-to-peer network are it is scalable and resilient. Okay, now let us see the diagram here how the peer-to-peer network works. So here we are seeing the various nodes which are linked with each other. Okay, and we have the peer A, B and C. The node A is connected with its neighbors. Okay, through the link Q1. Right? So the nodes which are connected to the link Q1 are the neighbors of the node A. Here as we are seeing in the dark line. Similarly, now the other next level neighbors, okay, for the nodes which are present at the link Q1, okay, are also we are seeing here, okay, which are connected with the link Q2. Okay, so Q1 is at first level, Q2 is at the next level neighbors. Similarly, the Q3, the nodes which are connected to the Q3, okay, from the, that is the link from the Q2 to Q3 are the next other level neighbors. Okay, that is the Q2, the nodes present at the terminal edge of the Q2 are the neighbors of the nodes at the Q1. Similarly, the nodes at the terminal edge of the Q3 are the neighbors of the nodes which are at the terminal edge of the link Q2, like this. Okay, that is how the neighbors connections are established here. Okay, so now let us assume here in the network, suppose if A is the peer, okay, node which wants to obtain a file, it wants to request for some file, let us name it as a ABC. So what it will do is it will create a query request message for ABC. Okay, and it will send that request to all its neighbors which are present, okay, at the level Q1. So each neighbor that does not have the file, what it will do in turn, okay, it queries its neighbors, okay, and so on. So for example, here in the diagram you are seeing the link labeled Q1 are the first set of the links over which the query from A propagates. That is, A is requesting for the file ABC. And links labeled Q2 are the next set of the links. Similarly, the links labeled Q3 are the other next set of the links. So, many peers are thus hard, okay, at work independently trying to locate a peer who has ABC and is willing to share it. So now suppose if a peer has ABC, the file which was requested by the node A, it returns a query hit message. Okay, that means for the query request sent from the A, if that particular file is present in any of the neighbors, it will returns a query hit message. Okay, otherwise, if it is not having the file, the request will be sent to the its neighbors, which are at the other next level, and it will try to find out. So now, if the file is present its neighbors, the query message will be sent to the A. So how it will be sending back to A? Because the traces, that is this message traces, the query hit message traces the path of the query request message, which was sent by A in reverse. Okay, so that is how the query hit message will be sent to the A, the node A. So the requesting node, that is here A is the requesting node. Okay, it may receive the multiple positive responses. The node A can get the response from this node also or response from this node also. So at that time what it will do, it will consider the response from any one node. Okay, let us assume A is getting the responses from the B and the node C. So let us assume it will accept the responses from the node B. Okay, and the node A sends its IP addresses to the node B with a request that ABC to be downloaded to that particular IP address. So once the IP address is known by the B, the file is then downloaded using the FTP or HTTP protocol. Okay, that is how the peer-to-peer networks works here. Okay. So now here, how the worms will get spread. That is, here we are going to discuss now the potential ways in which the peer-to-peer worms may spread. Okay, so for the first thing is, one of the simplest thing is for a malicious peer to respond positively to any query. Okay, we do not know that, okay, the neighbors, okay, attacker may be present as a neighbor. So he is the malicious peer now. So he can respond positively to any of the query. So that means if the requester then chooses to download the file from the malicious peer will send an infected file. Okay, with the name changed to match with the file which was requested by the peer A. Okay, so now the infected file contains obviously a worm which passes on its infection to the requester. So once infected, again the requester mimics the behavior of the malicious peer, thus helping to propagate the infection. Okay, so if the attacker is present in the neighbor, he will reply for the request from A and he will send the infected file to the A. And again, once the file from the malicious peer is downloaded, that file can infect the other files, okay, which are present on the peer A in the shared file. A will be having the many other files in the shared file. Those files will also get affected once the infected files are downloaded from the malicious peer. Okay, that is the one way. Then second way how the peer-to-peer worms will get spread is the peers in a given peer-to-peer network run the same P2P protocol. That's the second way. That is, there are usually a few different implementations of this protocol, leading to a little software diversity. Okay, so that is the peer maintains a list of neighbors. The one of the option here is the peers will maintain a list of the neighbors, which implies that the worm has ready targets. That means no need to perform the random scanning, okay, which was done in the internet scanning worms. Okay, so here peer will be having the list of the neighbors. Okay, and that list of the neighbors is nothing but the targets, okay, which they want to infect. So again here we can come across the two types of the worms. That is a malicious peer. We can come across two types of malicious peer. That is, the first type of the worm is said to be passive, since it propagates only when the requested to download a file is received. That is, the passive worm or passive malicious peer is nothing but the type of the worm, and it is going to propagate the worm to the other peers if and only if any file is requested to that particular malicious peer. Second type of the worm is active, since it can propagate on its own without receiving the request from its peers. Okay, so the second type of the malicious peer is called as the active, because it can propagate on its own without receiving any request from the peers. Okay, that is the concept of peer-to-peer networks. That is, initially we discussed how uh, the peer A can receive the response to its request. Then the two ways how the peer-to-peer worm will get spread, the possible ways of peer-to-peer worms getting spread. Okay, so up to now we have discussed about the topological worms. Okay, and with respect to topological worm, we have two types of topological worms, that is email worms and peer-to-peer worms. Okay, now let us see the mobile malware. That is how in the smartphones, okay, an attacker can play a role, okay, and how to improve the authentication. Okay, so obviously mobile malware, okay, means why it will occur, because here we have the various functionalities available in the smartphone also, right? So the new generation smartphones combines the functionality of the cell phone and the loose-end PC. Okay, they can be used for storing the confidential documents, then communicating via email, SMS, MMS, or taking photographs, right? Or like online videos, online. Okay, this also can be one of the example. Then they support the future rich applications that run on top of the complete operating system. So various operating systems supported by the smartphones can be the Windows, Mobile, Linux, recently the Mac operating system extended version, that is on the iPhone, Okay, we have various operating system also supported by the smartphones. That is again, this operating system will provide the various rich set of the APIs to access the phone book and other files, and allows to send the SMS, MMS, etc. Okay, so here unfortunately these APIs can also be used by the malware. Okay, for example, to read a confidential document on the smartphone and ship it to the attacker as an MMS attachment. Okay, so that is also the attack type of the attack which can be done, okay, in the smartphones. So now let us see the Bluetooth, the usage of the Bluetooth, how the communication will be established and how it is going to authenticate. So obviously again the Bluetooth is a connection established between what? Two devices. Okay, so it is a communication technology. It supports the short range wireless communication, that is a maximum the distance, okay, the maximum of between 10 and 100 meters between each devices, and it makes use of 2.4 gigahertz short wave radio technology. And also we know that Bluetooth is a complex and multi-layered protocol. So now let us see the discovery and how the user authentication will be done. Discovery is nothing but how the device, one Bluetooth device is going to discover another Bluetooth device, and what is the role of the authentication here. Okay, that is authorization. Okay, so now the many once we are using the PCs, okay, right, the users can make use of the PC, their mobile, okay, laptops, right, various devices they can use. Okay, so obviously the many PC users do not hesitate to click the hot links in their email, because in our email we'll be getting the lot of the links. Okay, and sometimes we'll be opening those links, okay, without the aware, right, even though we do not know the who is the sender of the email. Okay, there's a chances of clicking those type of the links. Okay, so this behavior carries over to the mobile world, okay, where many users have no hesitation in accepting a file from an unknown source. So now here the combination of the Bluetooth implementational vulnerabilities, then rich feature set of the smartphone, and unthinking user behavior has exposed the smartphone to various strains of malware. Okay, so that is to investigate the spread of the malware in the smartphones. Okay, for us it is necessary to understand the basics of how the smartphones exchange the files using the Bluetooth. Okay, so using the Bluetooth, how the communication will be done and how the file will be exchanged, that we have to understand. Okay, so obviously we know that that is I have a Bluetooth in my mobile. I want to send some files to another mobile which is having a Bluetooth. Okay, so how can I send? So I can send if and only if I know the address of another Bluetooth device. Okay, so the address of the Bluetooth device is represented with the variable known as BD underscore ADDR. BD stands for Bluetooth device, ADDR stands for address, that is BD underscore ADDR. Okay, so that is the Bluetooth enabled devices in its neighborhood, okay, will initialize as a inquiry procedure. That inquiry procedure includes broadcasting an inquiry request. That is, the peer will be sending, the Bluetooth device will be sending the inquiry request. So, the all other devices which are existing in the range of the initiator and which are all in the discoverable mode, okay, responds to this particular inquiry request. Okay, and in the response they will send their Bluetooth device address, that is BD_ADD, Bluetooth address of that particular device who is responding for the request. That address will be sent. This Bluetooth device address is 48-bit MAC address. The first 24 bits identifies the device manufacturer or the model, and the last 24 bits specifies a particular instance of that model. Okay, so now let us assume the device A wants to set up a connection with another device B. So the device A should know the Bluetooth device address of the device B. So how an device A can obtain the address of the B? So it is through again discovery procedure, right? So that is large percentage of the users keep their phones in the discoverable mode. So this is an again attractive way of harvesting the device addresses, especially in the crowded areas. Okay, that is obviously the mobile users mobiles will be in the discoverable mode, and once the request is identified by the other devices, it is going to respond. Okay, so and one more point to remember here is, even though okay few devices are not in discoverable mode, okay, there are a number of brute force techniques to extract its Bluetooth device address. That is how an attacker will do the infection, that is going to inject the infection to the other devices. Even though the mobiles are not, or the devices are not in the non-discoverable mode, brute force method will be used by the attacker to obtain the other devices Bluetooth device addresses. Okay, so now let us assume now here A is the attacker and B is the authenticated user. Now the B's Bluetooth device address, once it is known to the A, he could attempt to exchange the files with it, okay, using the OBEX protocol. OBEX protocol is nothing but object exchange protocol. OB for object, EX for exchange. Okay, using the OBEX protocol, okay, it will exchange the files. That is, OBEX protocol is used to transfer images, business cards and other files between the Bluetooth devices. So now an attacker A could use the OBEX protocol push to transfer a file containing the malicious code to the user B. Okay, A is the attacker here. Using the OBEX protocol, he will try to transfer the file which contains the malicious code, okay, to the device B. So now what is the role of the B here? Now A is the attacker, now B is the user. What he has to do? Whether to accept the file or not to accept the file. Okay, so usually the user authorization is important here. Okay, once B has received the file from A, he has to check whether to accept the file or not to accept the file. So user authorization is usually required before a file can be accepted by his smartphone. So each user selects a pin which varies between 4 and 16 characters long. So usually 4 characters are typically used. That is, for the authorization purpose, the B node can make use of a pin value. So that is, the smartphone usually prompts a user to enter his or her pin as a way to confirm whether an external file should be accepted or not. Okay, so again, depending on the operating system features, okay, some operating system versions accepts the file transfers without user authorization, and some smartphones allow the user to disable the authorization required option for the file transfers. Okay, so now let us see the usage of the link level security in the Bluetooth technology. Okay, so the level of the security provided by the user authorization. That is, user authorization is what? It is making use of a pin, okay, to decide whether to accept or not to accept. So the user authorization alone is generally inadequate. Therefore, another level of the security is provided by the Bluetooth is link level authentication and encryption. Link level authentication and encryption. So for this purpose, both the sides will compute a common secret called as the link key. The key will be generated at both the ends, A and B. So Bluetooth will make use of a procedure called as a pairing, wherein this key, which is known as a link key, is computed by the two participating devices. Okay, so that is the pairing is preceded by the discovery or inquiry and paging. Okay, that means what? Once the node or the device A has identified the device B, okay, then the communication between A and B will start through the pairing procedure. Okay, so that is A establishes a connection with the discovered device B, okay, following by the pairing procedure. Now let us see how the link key will be generated, okay, and what is the role of authentication with the usage of the link key. So now here we have the diagram with respect to the link key generation. So computing the link key. Computing the link key contains the two steps. This is the first step as we are seeing the diagram, which generates the initialization key. Then using the initialization key, the link key will be generated in the second diagram as we are seeing in the second diagram. Okay. Now let us see the explanation of this. So here we are seeing the box named with E22, okay, which is a encryption algorithm based on, that is E22 is the algorithm which makes use of a block cipher, which is based on the block cipher called as Safer Plus, SAFER plus, Safer Plus. Okay, that is algorithm in this one. This one is a Safer Plus. Okay. So now for this encryption algorithm, we have the three inputs. Both the sides will be making use of this encryption algorithm. Okay, so we have the three inputs for this E22, which is based on the block cipher known as the Safer Plus. The first input is the BD address of B, block device address of the B, which is 48-bit. Okay, both the sets we are seeing. Okay, then the in rand, that's a random number which is generated at A, which is a 128-bit. It is given at the A side also for the encryption, and the same value is given at the B side also. Then the pin number, the pin value, that is, it is a temporary pin which is agreed to by both the parties A and B. Okay, so all these three parameters are passed as input to the encryption algorithm E22, and we will be generating the initialization key represented as K init, which is of 128-bit. Both the devices A and B will be generating this K init. Okay, now using this K init value, now here we have the link key generation. So as we are seeing here in the diagram, we have the device A and device B. Okay, so and we are making use of the K init, which we have generated in the previous step. Okay, and the other parameters are the block device address of the A that is Bluetooth device address of A and Bluetooth device address of B. Okay, and we are making use of the encryption algorithm E21, which is same as E22, which is based on the block cipher called as the Cipher Plus. Okay, now here what is happening here is, okay, now at both the ends A and B, okay, they are making use of their own random numbers. Okay, link key random A, link key random B. LK stands for link key, RAND stands for random at the side A. Similarly, link key random value at the B. These are the random numbers which are maintained at both the devices respectively. Okay, these random numbers, as we are seeing here from the A side, is XORed with the K in it, which we have generated in the last step. So that will be passed to the B. Okay, similarly, we have the random number at the B side. Okay, now that random number value is here XORed with the K in it, as we are seeing here. Okay, random number XORed with the K in it, that will be sent to the A side. Okay, so that is at the both the sides, the XOR operation between K init and the respective random number will be performed, and that will be exchanged between A and B. Right? That is the purpose of exchanging here is, at both the ends they will extract the random numbers of the other side devices. That means now once these values are exchanged here after the XOR operation, okay, here B will extract the random number which was sent from A, and A will extract the random number which was sent from B by performing again one more XOR operation at both the sides. So here we have again one more XOR operation, that is the output of the XOR operation of K init and the random numbers at the particular devices is given as input to this XOR operation, as we are seeing here. Okay, and that will be again XORed with K init again. Again K init is given as input to this again second XOR operation, and the output of this XOR operation is given as input to the encryption algorithm E21. Okay, so that means here for the encryption algorithm E21, again here we have the three parameters as input. That is, at the A side, the Bluetooth device address of A, and the output of XOR operation of the K init, and the value sent from the B side is the one more input. Then the Bluetooth device address of the B is one more input. Similarly, at the B side also for the encryption algorithm A21, okay, we have one box taking, that is the inputs, that's 4 inputs. Okay, we have 4 inputs for the encryption algorithm. For each of the box have taking 2 inputs. Okay, here again we have at the B side the Bluetooth device address of the A. Okay, then the output of the XOR operation of the K init and the value sent from the A side. The output of this XOR operation. Then Bluetooth device address of the A. So 2 inputs to this encryption algorithm. And for the second box of the E21, we have the Bluetooth device address of the B and the random number at the B. Okay, each each box with E21 taking the two inputs. So here also at the A side also, the first box taking the 2 inputs, the Bluetooth device address of the A and the random number at A. For the second, the Bluetooth device address of the B and the output of the XOR operation between the K init and the output what it has got from the B. Okay, so again the output of each of the encryption algorithm will be encrypted, will be XORed at each of the ends to get the KAB. So KAB is the link key here which we have generated. Okay, so at the first level we have generated the initialization key, at the second level we have generated the link key, right? So this is how the link key is generated. Now using this link key, that is using the link key, how the authentication is performed. So basically again the link key is used for both authentication and encryption. Okay, here the character capital E stands for the encryption. Okay, in everywhere E21, E22, E1, all this stands for encryption algorithms. So now let us assume A wants to communicate with the B, and the A and B were already paired now. Okay, now let KAB be the common link key between A and B. So now suppose A wishes to authenticate B, it generates a random number rand A, which is a challenge. We know that challenge is a nonce value, right, which is basically used for authentication purpose. And this random number which was generated at A will be sent to the B. Okay, now the B has to send the response to A for the challenge what it has received. So at the B side, at the device B, the encryption of the three values will take place. That is the challenge what it has received from the A, then the link key KAB, then its Bluetooth device address B. Three values will be encrypted and the response will be sent to the A. Okay, so now at the A, here in the diagram we do not have any other further process, but in general it is understood. Okay, that is at the A what will happen, the decryption of the response will take place. So from the decryption it will retrieve back the challenge what it was encrypted at B. Then that challenge after decryption at A, that challenge values will be compared with the challenge what it is sent from A. If both are same, then authentication is completed, right? Okay, so this is how the authentication will be performed, okay, using the Bluetooth devices. So again we have the few drawbacks, okay, in the Bluetooth devices. That is hacking the link key can take place. That is, an attacker can launch a dictionary attack by sniffing each message involved in pairing and authentication. So these attacks will enable an eavesdropper to obtain the link key KAB. Right? So that is the dictionary attack is possible on the Bluetooth devices also. So other possible attacks is again by knowing the addresses. Okay, how an attacker can perform. Right? That is other social engineering attacks that enable an attacker to pair his device with that of a careless user. Okay, so once the attacker has the Bluetooth device address of a user during the discovery procedure, then the attacker's device makes a pairing request to the victim. Okay, so in the pairing request what happens, the pairing request contains the common name of the requester. Okay, for example Bobby. Okay, but one more thing to remember here is anybody can change the common name, but they cannot change the Bluetooth device address, right, of the one's smartphone. Right? So as we see in a phishing attack, the victim is lured to respond to the pairing request. Okay, so that is the one of the other type of attacks which is possible here. So, other thing is the paired devices are sometimes given the isolated status of the trusted devices. That means in some of the implementation, the two paired devices can exchange the files without the need for user authentication. So since there is no user authentication, okay, it keeps the door open for the mobile malware, okay, with the unsuspecting users, right? Okay, so that is again the disadvantage if the proper care is not taken for the authentication. Okay, so now in today class we have discussed about the topological malware. Topological malware, because we are going to call it as a topological malware because it can be represented with the usage of graphs. And we discussed about email worms and the peer-to-peer worms, and also we discussed about the mobile malware, and with the usage of the Bluetooth technology, how the one Bluetooth device can communicate with another Bluetooth device by using the discovery procedure. Okay, and next one more level of the security is achieved by at the link level security by the generation of the link level key KAB, and we saw how to make use of the KAB to authenticate, okay, themselves in the Bluetooth technology, and also the types of the attack which can be performed here also is the dictionary attack. Okay, that's it.